member of the California Arts Council and Beverly Hills Arts Commission, is the former West Coast editor of Andy Warhol's Interview magazine and society editor of the Herald Examiner. Her cover stories can be read in Venice and Detour magazines, and she is a contributing editor to California Apparel News. For the next half hour, Joan will bring you inside news and views on society, art, film, and the exhilarating worlds of these multifaceted people. Here is Joan Quinn.
Hi, I'm Joan Quinn, and welcome to Joan Quinn, Etc. Thanks for tuning in. We love to have you watch us. Ann Miller's here, and she'll be with us a little later. When I was in New York City recently, I went to the newly refurbished shop of Seaman Sheps. This creative jeweler lived from 1881 to 1972, and then the stock market crash came and ruined his young business. He slowly worked his way back till in the 40s, he was called America's court jeweler because he had such great clientele, including the DuPonts, the Rockefellers, and the Mellons. He made jewelry with big, colorful mixes of stones, and they were complementary to the bold fashion of the day. His jewels were featured in commercial ads, in motion pictures, and always in fashion editorial in the pages of Harper's Bazaar and Vogue magazine. Florienne Ho worked with Mr. Sheps and his daughter Patricia Vale, also his niece Diane Dillon, at the Park Avenue shop. We'll open this interview with a photo of Elizabeth Taylor wearing Seaman Sheps jewelry. Don't go away. Watch Florienne Ho, and then when we come back, we'll talk to Ann Miller. Florienne Ho, who's been at Seaman Sheps since 1969. Flo, how did you get here, and why did you come to Seaman Sheps?
Well, actually, when I graduated from college, I had majored in jewelry design, and I had grown up with Mr. Sheps' granddaughter. We were contemporaries and attended the same elementary school.
Wow.
So I remember seeing Mr. Sheps when I was little and knowing him as a grandfather, actually.
And then you worked in the shop with his daughter, Patricia.
That's right.
And she also was a designer.
Absolutely.
Did you see any of the famous clientele who came and went, or tell us a little bit about it?
Well, I've heard some pretty amazing tales about Seaman, who was a nonconformist at his very best, and he would not stand for anything that didn't suit him. I mean, I've understood that he apparently kicked out Gary Cooper.
Was Gary Cooper a client?
Apparently, yes, until he was kicked out because he disputed a repair charge with Mr. Sheps.
Oh, that's great. Who else used to come in?
The Duchess of Windsor, apparently, who was very demanding, and she'd be accompanied by her husband, and Pat would tell me that the Duchess of Windsor would sort of slap her husband's the back of his hand on the counter just like a little boy and commandeer the whole conversation.
Did they have certain things that they were looking for when they came in? Do you remember certain types of jewelry?
Probably one-of-a-kind pieces for which Seaman was so famous, only because every piece was different depending upon the stones.
And I think the Duchess loved the shells we had talked about. You're wearing the shell earrings today, but we have these shells.
Right, she also, yes, she loved shells, and she had several different styles, not only from Mr. Sheps, but from others.
Tell us about these two bracelets. I think these are, this whole page is like a classic Seaman Sheps page.
Oh, absolutely. These designs were probably conceived in the 50s, but they are still as contemporary and as lasting today as they were then.
What is this called?
Well, we call that the shrimp earring because it looks a little bit like a shrimp.
And
the link bracelet, alternating yellow gold with whatever stone-colored links are available, and the two can be interlocked to make a necklace, which is a very bold look.
What other things? Do you remember some little anecdotes from early days about Mr. Sheps? You said he was quite avant-garde or cantankerous, or what should we say?
Well, he just wouldn't brook fools lightly, and his inspiration was so multi-sourced. he would get inspiration from looking at a seashell, from going to the flower market, from going into the wardrobe, the garment district, and looking at buttons. He was very much Renaissance in a way, in that anything inspired him, like a lawn chair.
And who did he inspire then, as far as designers were concerned?
Well, I've heard that David Webb was apparently a big admirer of Seaman Shep's, so much to the point that he copied him quite a bit.
I remember one time Patricia Vale telling me that David Webb was standing outside the window and he was drawing, and she said, they took a chair out to him and said, "Mr. Webb, would you be more comfortable while you're making your copy if you were sitting?"
Yes, I had heard that very much. And apparently at one point when I think Mr. Webb was about 20, he was working for Bergdorf Goodman. And a saleswoman in the store saw Mr. Shep's wife wearing a pin and asked if she could show the pin to their designer, and that turned out to be the young David Webb.
Who, then I understand Mrs. Shep said, "Just go right ahead and make a copy in front of us because we know what you're doing."
That's right, and then subsequently there followed quite remarkable copies.
Yes, and I think they went way back when you were talking about the sea to the frogs and the fish and different things of nature.
Yes, Seaman, he loved fish, he loved frogs, he loved animals. He had a very whimsical approach.
One other thing that I remember, and I'm asking you about it, is I know Fidel Castro's sister was living in New York, and I think Fidel was going to NYU, and he came in, or she was going to NYU. Do you remember this story?
Somewhat. I know Fidel came in with his brother, who apparently was Raul.
Yes.
And at that time, they were quite avid in their consumption of fine jewelry as opposed to nowadays.
So I think they got some things. I think it just goes to show you that his appeal was to a varied group and people who were a little bit, people who wanted to make a statement.
Oh, absolutely. He had a following among people in the arts, among people in movies, theater, and Andy Warhol used to be one of his most devoted fans.
I think Andy used to stop in every day to see if he was missing anything.
And once a month he'd come in and drop off an interview magazine to us, and he just loved looking at things. Loved it, and bought jewelry as well as objets. But he had a very good eye, Andy did.
Thank you. Thanks for being with us and telling us a little bit about the past of Seaman Shep's. Thanks for being with us on Joan Quinn, etc. That jewelry was great, and Ann Miller was watching the clip with us.
I sure was. It's beautiful.
Did you know Seaman Shep's?
No, I never knew him.
But David Webb was...
Oh, David Webb. Oh, boy, and how.
And Verdura.
Yes. Oh,
Yeah.
yes. Beautiful.
Really. Well, Ann Miller was nice enough to come to the set and be with us today. And she's been the star of 40 motion pictures, including New Faces of 1937, remember that date, Easter Parade, On the Town, and Kiss Me Kate. Then it was Broadway in the George White Scandals of 1939.
And 40.
And 40. And then Mame.
Mame.
In
1969 and 70.
And then 8 years of Sugar Babies with Mickey Rooney.
9 years.
Oh my, 9 years?
9 years, yeah.
How did you do it?
When you introduced me, you should have said, well, I want to introduce what's left of Ann Miller after 9 years with Mickey Rooney.
How could you do 9 years of one thing?
It is hard, and yet every night when you go out, Joan, it's like opening night because you have a different audience. Some are smiling audiences, some are applauding, some will just go, and then at the end they'll give you a standing ovation. You think you're laying a big egg, and at the end they'll all stand up and just love it. But it's every night it's a challenge.
Did you respond to the audience? Do you respond when you're on stage?
Oh, yes. Sometimes you have to woo them a little bit. You have to really make love to them, and then they'll love you back.
Do you go backstage and say, "Oh, what are we doing? How are we going to get them up?"
No, no. You have to have an attitude. You can't get bored. A lot of people have asked me. That's an interesting question. Do you ever get bored? But you know, because every night you're walking out in front of a different audience. Some of them are older audiences. Some are younger, and you have to woo them. Sometimes you walk out, you got it made. And Mickey, you know, was wonderful to work with because he understood that. A lot of people don't understand that.
But you're talking about the audience. What about your own physical? You know, we all have ups and downs,
Oh,
too.
sure. Well, you go on, you know, as they say in show business, the show must go on. And in my case, it really did, because I went on a couple of times with a broken hand. I had to be in a cast.
And you
I
still went out?
I went out and did it because then the audience knew, they explained. Then one time I literally almost broke my ankle, and I went out with it bandaged up. But those things happen in showbiz, and when you're in a show for 9 years, you know things like that are bound to happen. Dancers are always having something happen to them because they work so hard.
That show moved around. You were in London for a while with
Yes.
it.
Well, we were on Broadway 3 years, and we're 4.5 years on the road, and then we were almost 6 months in London, about 5.5 months in London.
Did you take your dog with you?
Not to London, they don't allow you, but I took them all over. I have 2 dogs. Took them all over the United States with me.
So did that make you feel more kind of a little homey?
Yes, it did. And then my secretary, Debbie, you know, at night there was never any restaurants to go to. Them mostly always closed because I can't eat before I went on stage because you can't dance with a lot of food blopping up and down. So I just go out after the theater, but there were always sort of greasy spoons that were open. So Debbie, who had never cooked in her life, learned to cook out of that Fanny Farmer cookbook, and she became a very good little cook.
Did you have an apartment?
Well, yes, in New York I had a lovely apartment that
I
the
see.
producers got me, and in London I had David Merrick's apartment at the Savoy Hotel,
so,
and I was at the Savoy Theater, so I just walked across the street, and there I was.
That was great.
Oh, it was fabulous. It was a wonderful experience, Joan, and of course working with Mickey, who is such a great pro. It was fun. We had a good time.
The thing was, I remember somebody came backstage to visit you, and they said you had all your wigs lined
Yeah.
up. I never
Working
saw
wigs.
you. Tell us. I mean, I don't know how
Well,
many they were.
I came to the show with 4 wigs, and he said, "Why 4?" The producer. I said, "Well, you have matinees, you know." And then I finally wound up with 8 wigs because when you go on the road with the show, you go in places like Georgia, which is very humid, and places like Florida, which is even more humid. The wigs, every performance, you had to have one that was fluffed up, but at the end of the show, it'd all be blah, you know, and there was never time to redo because you have to bake these. You roll them up and bake them in an oven for them to come out looking correct, you know.
Is that right?
Oh, yeah.
Well-
and I got kidded by that wig. That wig became famous because down in New York and Florida, I'd have to spray it so much to keep that look. Otherwise, it just blah, you know.
The helmet.
Yeah, and then everybody used to, I got kidded so much about that wig, and then some of the comedians made fun. You know, they said, oh, a Santa Ana wind came, and it actually, you know, blew Ann Miller's wig, which is funny. So I've decided now maybe I should just burn them, you know, because I probably won't be wearing that hairstyle anymore because that was strictly 30s. That show was supposed to be 30s.
And it was
Sugar Babies.
designed just
Just
exactly
for
the
that,
show.
yeah.
The person who came back was Divine, who also loved to dress up as a woman. He played female roles.
Oh, yes.
And he loved you. He used
Did
to
he really?
visit me at my house and see you across the street. And
Oh,
he'd go,
I love it.
oh, I love Ann
Oh,
Miller.
God, that's
And he
funny.
came back and said, she's got wigs lined up all over the place.
He was so cute. Some of
Yeah.
the gay boys one night at this big thing over, was it Studio 51 or
54.
Studio 1? Studio 1 here in town.
Oh, in town, right.
Yeah. They did a whole number, about 10 boys. They all got dressed up with wigs that would look like mine, and they had on short costumes and long stockings. They did a whole takeoff on me in
Dancing.
Kiss Me Kate and Too Darn Hot. It was the funniest thing I have ever seen in my life, and you know they were good.
And you know,
They were good.
The great thing is that you have such a good sense of humor
Oh,
about
I love it. Oh, I just love it. Are
Well,
you kidding? It's a compliment.
One of the things with Ann Miller is she's gotten all kinds of awards. She's gotten a Best Actress Award, Best Female Entertainer, Best Dance Number. USC gave you a Lifetime Achievement Award. But the one award that I love the most is Best Legs Award from the Hall of Fame.
Oh, yes, that was an honor.
Tell us about that.
Well, that happened in Sugar Babies. Most of these awards, strangely enough, came out of Sugar Babies, and I got that when I was there. And then the Givenchy hosiery people gave me stockings for life.
Is that right, for
Yes.
your beautiful legs?
And the pantyhose, you know. And did you know that I was the first, I am actually I guess you'd call me the mother of pantyhose. Did you know that?
No.
Or grandmother, what do you want to call me?
Does that go along with the Best Legs Award?
Well, I don't know about that, but I did. I got so tired of wardrobe ladies. I used to wear these little panties, and I'd have to put on these long stockings. They used to have seams down the back, you know, stockings with then they'd have to sew them to the top of the panties so I could wear these short costumes and go out and dance. And I got stuck so many times because, you know, I'd get a run and they say, cut, Miss Miller has to change her stocking. Then I have to stand, you know, and I was so exhausted. So finally one day, Willis of Hollywood came in to see me, who furnished me these gorgeous, beautiful silk stockings. And I said, Mr. Willis, why don't you do stockings like you do ballet tights?
Really?
I am dead serious, and he did it, and that was the birth of pantyhose.
Oh my, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
But one thing to go along with your best legs, you live across the street, and
Yes,
when
you're
your
my
mother
neighbor.
and when your mother was alive, she used to walk Poochie up and down the
Poochie,
street.
oh yes.
And I would walk my twins. This
Yes.
was 25 years ago, and everyone used to say, Mrs. Miller has the best legs on the block.
Oh boy, that's a compliment.
So Mrs. Miller took your award away from you.
That's cute.
Isn't it?
I think that's very sweet.
We always loved your mom so much.
My mother had the most beautiful legs.
She did.
And she was a beautiful woman. Even up until she became 89, my mother had this marvelous skin. I just so happy I knew my mother.
She was great. And when we come back, one thing that Mrs. Miller always told me when we were walking our little things together, she said, Ann's away doing dinner theater or doing some theater, and she says, you know, Joan, everyone loves a tap dancer.
Oh, did she say that? Isn't it
And so
funny?
when we come back, we'll see some of Ann Miller tap dancing.
That's cute. Thank you.
Hi, we're back and we're talking to Ann Miller. We were just talking about how everyone likes tap dancing because that's what Ann's mother told me many, many years ago. But Ann says there's
a slight problem there.
Yeah.
I just saw the MGM documentary, which was on television. It was in like 5 or 6 different parts. And they left out Eleanor Powell. They didn't do hardly anything on her. They totally left me out. So I decided the man that wrote the Lion Roars did not like tap dancers. And the thing that's so strange is that Eleanor Powell literally saved MGM from bankruptcy. When she, before she did Broadway Melody of 1936, they were going into bankruptcy.
Is that
She came in and did it, and was such a smash hit that it set the MGM back on its haunches. And that none of that was in the documentary. They left out so many things, and it disturbed me, you know.
They'll have to do something else.
And now MGM, that was done by TNT. That was not MGM. Now MGM is going to do their own. And George Feltenstein and Roger Mayer are going to produce it, and it's going to be, I think it's either another That's Entertainment or That's Dancing. But I know that I'm in quite a bit of that.
Well,
Because
you
I was
did.
over there 14 years, Joan. Can you believe it didn't have me in the documentary? I couldn't believe it.
And you did
It's
a lot
crazy.
of dancing. Your bio, I hate to say this because I don't know, I feel funny saying it, but your bio says you're in your late 60s and you're still in such great shape and you're still dancing and you're still running up and down the street.
Well, yeah.
What do
I'm
you
still-
do?
Oh, I don't know. I'm 69. I mean, everybody knows it, so you know, but I feel fine, and gosh, I eat everything, and I don't diet, really. I should, but I don't.
Do you exercise at home?
Well, no, not really. I
you
never
dance?
did. No.
What do you
Tap
do?
dancing is like bicycle riding. I love to walk, and you know, I used to play quite a bit of golf, but when I go back on the dance floor, I just go back on and dance, you know. But see, ballerinas are different. They miss one day, a ballerina, they stiffen up
And, yeah.
and on point and all. And
Right.
it's not, tap dancing isn't like that. It's more like bicycle riding. It's not that,
Well,
not as,
we're going to watch you tap dance because when I said Ann Miller was coming on, everyone said the Ann Miller.
Oh, go on.
So they did. Everyone knows Ann Miller.
Oh,
So we're going to
thank
see
you.
a clip from, forgot what it is.
It's Easter Parade, Shaking the Blues Away.
Okay, good. Let's watch that now. Wow, can you still dance like that?
Well, pretty much. Oh yeah, I can still get in there and shake a leg.
Okay, how many times did you have to do that over? Did you cut or did you do
They
it?
did that one in cuts. Always on the film they do cuts, you know, but on stage there's no cuts.
No.
No cuts.
You have to go
If you
for
make a
it.
mistake on stage, that's it. You're in trouble, you know.
In 1972, you wrote a book called Miller's High Life. I think
Oh,
the titles
yes.
are so great. And you talked about your romances and your marriages. Give
Yes.
us a little rundown.
Oh gosh, well, at one time I did know the Shah of Iran, you know, briefly, and then of course I've dated a couple of marvelous Maharajas, you know, which is kind of fun. I got to know Maharaja Baroda and Maharaja Kuch Bahar, who was really handsome, and then Connie Hilton was a dear friend of mine. We were never really romances. These were not romance. These were just wonderful friends. And I just have been so fortunate that I've always been able to keep friends through the years, you know, my men friends.
What about-
And I love men. I love my girlfriends, too.
What
Well,
about-
naturally, I like men the best.
What about marriage?
Well, marriage, I didn't do too good. I always married very handsome, good-looking playboys. And because I thought that meant glamour. Because I've worked so hard all my life. And the idea of getting married to somebody that had a glamorous life, you know, with the yachts and all that. But after you marry someone like that, you just cannot live out of a martini shaker and lots of laughing. That isn't life. So I made very poor judgment. But I'm still alive and kicking, and I decided that somewhere along the way I probably will meet somebody. And now that I'm older, because I was very young, actually, Joan, all three of my marriages, in 5 years, represent 5 years only of my life.
Really?
But now that I'm older and more sophisticated, I think now I would probably be able to have meet somebody that has spiritual qualities as well as money and glamour. I would like to just meet a really nice guy,
What
and
about
preferably somebody in the business.
What about someone younger?
Well, no, I don't believe in that. I would rather have somebody my same age or maybe a couple of years older than me, you know.
Were you an only child?
An only chicken.
So, and we always hear about your mother being so influential, like a real
Yes.
stage mother. And a father, was there a father at home?
No, my father was back in, they divorced when I was 10 years old. No, my mother was really not a stage mother. She just drove me to and from the studios, but if anybody got fresh with me, you know, she would literally go in with a handbag and knock them flat. And she did that one time to a producer.
she?
Oh, yes. And they didn't fool with me. They were afraid of her because she was very, very strong. But she never stayed on the sets and never got in people's hair. But I was very I'm so lucky because I did have talent. And I was at 3 studios in my lifetime. I was at RKO, Columbia, and MGM. And also Republic. I did in fact, I'm getting a Golden Boot Award from Gene Autry and Roy Rogers and that whole big group because I did the first musical Gene Autry ever did and the only one he ever did. And I was the first girl he ever kissed other than his horse.
Oh.
So I'm going to get a Golden Boot Award and I'm quite thrilled about it.
I think the Golden Boot you can take to Sedona, where your other
yes,
house is.
I am going to. I love Sedona. Do you know about Sedona?
No, tell us a little bit. You wrote after the Miller High Life. You wrote.
Then I wrote
Tapping.
this up in Sedona. It's called Tapping into the Force. It's a metaphysical book. And I never went to Sedona because of metaphysical reasons. I know that that's a great metaphysical center, but I just happen to think it's the most beautiful spot on earth. And I'm going to build up there.
And how long is it? Is it a short flight from Los Angeles?
Yes, it's like an hour to Phoenix, and then you can either drive a car 2.5 hours from Phoenix to Sedona, or you can fly. They have little shuttle flights that go up there.
What do you do when you're there?
Well, that's it. You do nothing. There's one little theater. It's called the Theater Shack, and marvelous restaurants, about 4, and marvelous friends.
You have
really,
friends there?
Really wonderful friends.
People
I adore them.
People who live there?
Yes, and they're wonderful. A lot of them are like the former chairman of the board of General Motors has a home there, and his wife.
I see.
And there are a lot of retired people and a lot of people that are not retired. And you know, the young lady Diana Ladd lives up there.
You told me before we went on that I'm psychic. You said I'm psychic. I can't help it. I'm psychic.
You asked me about my book. My book is on psychic things. Everybody is psychic, you know, Joan. We all are. We're born with a sixth sense.
Do you do readings for other people, or is it just for yourself?
No, I don't do readings. I just have hunches. I could be seated in an airport, for instance, and look at somebody and say, "You're going to go somewhere soon. Don't do it." And they'll look, they'll think, "This lady's crazy. She's bonkers." But if I tell them, they better not do it. I just have that. My antennas somehow are on a high frequency. I just have these hunches. We are all born with it, Joan. All of us. All of us have it.
But was it in your family?
Yes. My great-grandmother was a medium. And she said there'd be one grandchild that would have some of her psychic ability, and for me to use it only in God's name. But I was just born with it. And I can help other people sometimes.
Do you use it for yourself too in
Well,
certain
yes,
ways?
like I had the other day, I told my people at my home, I said, go get some bottled water because we're going to have an earthquake, and very soon. And 2 days later, we had the quake.
But would you be able to say, read a contract and say, "Oh, I get some bad vibes from this"?
Yes.
Does that happen?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
So it helps you in
Yes,
a lot of ways.
and people, I have met people that I have worked with, producers and things, and I'd say, I'm not going to get along with this one. Well, you have the same. We're all born with this.
You can just
tell.
tell.
Dogs and cats have it more than anybody. They have this sixth sense, and in some people it's more pronounced than others. But we're all born with it.
Well, use your psychic powers and tell us what your new projects are before we leave the show today.
Well, I may do Gold Diggers if they come up with the money. I know they want me, and they're marvelous people. They were associated with 42nd Street.
If they do Gold Diggers and you go back on stage again, will they make some of the dance steps easier for you?
No, why?
I don't know.
Why? No.
Sometimes
When you do
ballerinas walk through their steps, or do you think, no?
No. I really, Joan, would like to get away from doing always dancing. I would like to be in television and do an acting part with some singing and some dancing if they want it. But I want to do television. I'd love to do a talk show like what you're doing.
Okay, we're gonna leave, but we're gonna leave with Ann Miller doing the talk show. So you can say goodbye for us and tell them to come back.
I hope that you'll tune in again. This has been great fun. I hope you've enjoyed it too.
And thank you to Ann Miller for being on Joan Quinn, etc. We'll see you next time.